Hey everyone, my name is Dominic Lehnert, and in this video we are going to talk about the biggest advantage, in my opinion, that Integromat has over Zapier. So in this video, we're going to completely leave aside the advantages that Zapier has, because it definitely has some advantages, like it's extremely easy. It's extremely easy to get into. It's super simple to build your first workflow. You don't have to know anything about coding, all these kinds of things. Integromat has a way steeper learning curve, but we're going to leave all of that aside today, and we want to look at what is the biggest advantage, in my opinion, that Integromat has over Zapier. And that is, for me, what I would call the escape hatches in Integromat. So in Zapier, you have very, very strict things that you can do. So there is a lot of functionality you can use. There's plenty of apps that you can talk to, plenty of web applications that you can talk to, plenty of functionality that you can use. But it's really hard if there's something that's missing there. There's not really an escape hatch you can use. And in my opinion, Integromat has that functionality, because in Integromat, you can actually kind of create your own functionality. So in one way, you can do that is if you actually come across something that you simply cannot do in Integromat, what you can do is you can have the piece of code that you need to do this functionality. So it might be a piece of Python code that's hosted in a Jupyter notebook or somewhere else in a web application, and you need to talk to that piece of code because the stuff you're doing in that piece of code, you're simply not able to represent in Integromat. You can just make an API call to your Jupyter notebook, to whatever web application you're hosting the code in, and you can run the code there and then come back to Integromat with a webhook, for example, and then just use a webhook. So you make an API call to wherever your code is, or you trigger a webhook that is triggering your code out of Integromat. Then you run the code, and then you send back the result from the code into Integromat, into webhook. And since you are so flexible with the webhooks, it's possible to do this. So you can just send code or send information into Integromat from basically anywhere, which allows you to run your code somewhere else. So I think this is one huge advantage, or maybe the biggest advantage, in my opinion, that Integromat has, that it has a lot of functionality, but there is really no boundary because of this escape hatch that you can use. So whenever you get to the boundary and you just can't implement what you're trying to do in Integromat, you can actually go back out, solve your problem a different way, write a piece of Python code somewhere, and then just get the information back in and keep running your Integromat scenario. Big advantage. And the other thing is that even if you're trying to run it in Integromat and you're, for example, trying to talk to different web applications, in Zapier, the amount of actions you can do to a web application and the amount of different triggers you can basically use is limited by what is already in here. So in Zapier, you have a limited amount of functionality, and you can't add new functionality yourself. So you don't have the possibility to just make arbitrary API calls to an API, for example, to the Google Sheets API, and just basically create your own new functionality. You can't do that in Zapier, so you can only do whatever is already possible in Zapier. And the cool thing I think about Integromat is that you have the possibility to make arbitrary API calls. So basically, even if the functionality you're trying to do, so for example, if we look at the Stripe integration, there's so much stuff you can already do. And I would argue that's actually more than you can do in Zapier. But there's so much stuff you can already do. That's basically, if you think about it, these are just pre-built API calls to the Stripe API. But you also have the possibility to make an API call yourself and put together the API call yourself, which basically means anything that the Stripe API allows you to do, you can do. Even if it's not yet built into Integromat, you can just put together the API call yourself, and you can kind of create the functionality yourself. So this is, in my opinion, the biggest advantage of Integromat. This kind of notion of you have escape hatches, you can get out of Integromat if you need to, and then get back in to use the nice parts about Integromat. And the other thing is that you have the possibility to make arbitrary API calls. So if you're thinking about using Zapier or Integromat, this is definitely something you want to think about, and you want to check, is there, if you think about using Zapier, because it's just simpler and easier to set up in the beginning, is there functionality in Zapier that you need that is not in there yet? Because it's really hard to build your own functionality into Zapier if it's not already there. These are the advantages of Integromat, in my opinion, or the biggest advantages of Integromat, in my opinion. If you want to help me make these videos, and if you want to help me stay caffeinated, you can just buy me a coffee at the link below, or if you found this video helpful, just buy me a coffee. And also, if you are currently trying to figure out a problem in Integromat, or you're thinking about switching to Integromat or implementing a solution in Integromat, and you want to just bounce off some ideas, or you want to discuss very specific questions that you might have, you can also just buy me a coffee. That allows me to put aside some time on my calendar, and we can sit down together, do a Zoom call, and discuss your specific questions. My name is Dominik Lehnert. Take care and goodbye.